Hello everyone, welcome to BISP Solutions. I am Preeti, working as Oracle Fusion Functions Consultant. So in today's video, we will discuss the configurations that we have to do in the Fusion application for the accounts receivable module. So in today's session, we will discuss the order to cash steps. Then we will discuss the roles that is required by the user to perform the task related to account receivable module in the Oracle Fusion application, and then we will see the transactional process that takes place in the Fusion application for the AR module. We will discuss how to create the standard invoice, credit memo and debit memo. So let's start with the order to cash steps. So you can see on the screen we have a image that is for the order to cash cycle. Here first the sales team of the organization will receive the sales order, or you can say the sales inquiry. Then the sales team of the organization will check the availability of the resources, and if they have resources then they will book the order. And then next step is fulfillment team. Here the fulfillment team of the organization will process the order received by the sales team, that is pick release. We have to pack the items. In case of inventory, we will pack the items and the ship will be confirmed. Then next step is the distribution team will ship the order to the site address provided by the customer. Then the accounting team of the organization will take care of the accounting of this invoice, in which they will create the invoice and generate the invoice and will receive the payment. For that they have to create the receipt. Now these are the roles which are provided by the user to perform the task related to account receivable module in the application. We have to provide the account receivable manager role. It manages all account receivable activities, including defining policy and controls, establishing processes and procedures, resolving issues, monitoring and analyzing account receivable balances of the customer, and creating reports and business intelligence. Then we have to provide the accounts receivable specialist. It manages and implements all customer payment activities, including receiving customer payments and electronic remittance advice, performing cash handling activities, processing under customer payments and applying payments to customer accounts. So all the payment related works, or you can say the receipts related work, will be done by the user who have the account receivable specialist role. Then we have to provide the bill manager segregated role. It is the individual responsible for creating and managing accounts receivable transactions, revenue management and other related tasks. Then we have to provide the billing specialist segregated role. It is the user who have this role will be individually responsible for managing customer billing. So the user who have the billing specialist segregated role will manage all the billing related work of AR module. Then we have to provide the revenue analyst. It manages and implements revenue adjustment, revenue recognition, revenue accounting, creating and processing of revenue documents, and the inquiry of the revenue documents and adjustments. Also manages the defining of open and close periods and transferring entries to the general ledger. So as you know that for creating the accounting in the Oracle Fusion application, we have to open the periods of the sub modules as well as the general ledger module. So the person who have the role of revenue analyst will be able to open and close those periods. Our next role is revenue manager. The person who have this role will manage revenue adjustments, revenue recognition, revenue accounting, approval of revenue carve-outs, creation and processing of revenue documents, and the inquiry of the revenue documents and adjustments. And it also manages the defining of open and close periods and transferring entries to the general ledger. Now we will directly move to our application and will tell you how to provide these roles to the user. So this is our application. For the role related work, you have to go to this navigation and then you have to go to the tools Then go to the security console. You can see here the user tab, click on it. Now search for the user account. So I have logged in with the KC Brown. Let's search with the user I have logged in with. Click on the display name. Now here we will search for the roles which are related to account receivable module. So you can see on the screen account receivable manager role, account receivable specialist role. For adding more roles, you have to click on this edit icon and then click on add role. You can see on the screen that is revenue analyst role. Select the role which have a code ORA and then click on add role membership. In the revenue manager also you have to select the role which is starting with the code ORA. Again click on add role membership. So we have provided billing manager and specialist role as well. Now click on done and then click on save and close. After providing any role to the user, there is a mandatory step that you have to run the LDAP. Now we have to run the LDAP job. For that you have to go to the navigation again, and from navigation you have to go to the tools and then go to the schedule processes. In the schedule new process, you have to search for the LDAP job. Search for LDAP here. Then click on OK. It will synchronize users, roles and role grants with definitions in LDAP. Now click on OK. Then click on submit. So we have provided all the roles which are required by the user to perform the task related to AR module in the Oracle Fusion application. Now let's move back to our presentation. Now our next task is that we have to discuss the transactional process that takes place in the AR module. Like we have to create the standard invoice. Now how we will create the standard invoice in the application? Let's move back to the application. Click on home page. Go to the navigator and here you will find the receivable module. And under the receivable module you have to go to the billing workbench area. Then click on task list. Now in the transaction workbench area you can select the create transaction option. Now with the option create transaction you can create the invoice. In the transaction class you have to select the class of the invoice, whether it is invoice, credit memo invoice or debit memo invoice. So right now we are creating the standard invoice, so select invoice here. Here you have to select the business unit. In the list of business unit you will be able to see only those business units for which you have access, that means for which the user have access. Then in the transaction source you have to select which kind of transaction source it is. Let's take it as manual. Then in the transaction type you have to select the type of this transaction. So this is invoice. Now if you have a salesperson name you can mention here. To whom you are billing this invoice, you have to select the name of that party here. So in my case I am billing this invoice to the ABC Consulting. Select this customer, then click on OK. By the time you have selected this customer name, rest of the details related to this customer is autofilled by the system. Now here you have to select the payment term. Let's take it as net 15. Then search the item. So I am taking it as consulting service. So here we have to give the quantity that will be counted in the days. You can see here the unit of measure, days. Let's say we have provided 18 days service to this ABC Consulting. Let's take it as 18 days, and here you have to give the cost of per day and that will be counted in the unit price. Let's take it as $255. So we are charging $255 for per day to this ABC Consulting. You can see the total here. The amount is 4590. Now click on show more here. Click on payment tab. Here you can select the remit to address. Also, if you want to change the payment term, you can select here. From the drop down list, you can select the payment term. Let's change it to the net 30. And you can see here the due date is changed according to the payment term. Now let's move to the next tab, that is miscellaneous. You can see here generate bill. Yes. You can select the option here. If you have any special instructions regarding creation of this invoice, you can mention here. So in this way you can fill out the rest of the details as per your client requirement. Now click on save. Here you can see the status. It is coming as incomplete. Now when you will click on this complete, you have two options. One is complete and review, and the another option is complete and close. So let's click on complete and review. Then you will see that the status from incomplete will be changed to complete. Click on complete and review here. You can see your status is changed. Now click on view image. Here you will be able to see the image of this invoice that we have created now. So this is the image of the invoice that we have created. This is the bill to, that is customer detail. This is the ship to detail. If in case bill to and ship to details are different, then you will be able to see the different addresses here. You can see the invoice date. Then this is the final amount of the invoice, and here you can see this is the product, this is the description of the services that we have provided to the ABC Consulting, and here is the quantity which will be measured in the days, and this is the unit price, that is the per day charges which we are charging from this ABC Consulting, and this is the final amount. And this is how we can create the invoice. Again, go to the actions. We have few more options. Here you can review the distributions. You can see the receivable, then in the rounding off there is 0 amount, and the revenue you can see the amount 4590, that is a bill amount. Click on save and close. Click on view balance details. You can see the balance detail for particularly for this invoice. This is the original amount, and we did not book any receipt against this invoice yet. So the balance amount for this invoice is 4590. Click on done. Let's create the accounting for this invoice in draft. For that, you have to go to the account in draft option. From here you can see the accounting created by the system for this invoice. Receivable account is credited and the revenue account is receivable account is debited and the revenue account is credited. So this is how the accounting is done for this invoice. Even if you want to see the accounting, you can go to the actions, and from here also you can see the accounting for this invoice. Click on done. So this is how you can create the invoice in the AR module. If in case you want to edit some information or some charges, you have to click on this incomplete tab, and you can add the lines, you can add the charges, click on add line. Say in case we have forgotten to add the some charges for the supporting project that we have provided services for. So in that case you have to go to the transaction and you have to click on incomplete option, and you can add the charges that you have forgotten by mistake. Click on save. Then click on complete and review. And now go to the actions and then click on view balance. Now you can see that when we have edited this invoice, the original amount of the bill has changed now. So this is how, if you have any editing, then you can make the editing to this invoice by creating on this incomplete option. Again we have to create accounting for this invoice, and then click on view accounting. Click on done here, and then click on save and close. So we have discussed how to create the standard invoice for the AR module. Now our next task is that if we have to create the credit transaction for the same invoice, how we can create the credit transaction in the application. So we have three different ways for creating the credit transactions in the AR module. First of all, if you want to see the invoice that we have created now, for that you have to go to the task panel, and here you will have the option that is manage transactions. Under the manage transaction task, you will be able to see the invoice that you have created now. You can search with the customer name here. Our customer name was ABC Consulting. Search with that customer. Click on OK and then click on search. So this is the transaction that we have created. You can see the amount here, that is 8890. Open this transaction. You can see the lines that you have created for this invoice, and also you can see the rest of the details that we have filled while creating this invoice. Now click on save and close. And our next task is that we have to create the credit transaction for the same. So when we create the credit transaction, say in case we have by mistake we have charged some extra amount to this customer, and now we have to reduce that sales amount with that excess amount that we have charged to that customer. In that case, we create the credit transaction against any invoice. Like as per the business requirement, if any error in line amount, freight charges or other charges, or we have any sales return, then the user will create the manual credit memo transaction and apply the same to the original transaction in the application. So for creating the credit transaction, we have three different ways. So this is our transaction. You have to select this transaction line, then you have to go to the actions, and then from the actions you can select the credit transaction. So this is the original transaction reference. You can see here you are creating the credit transaction against this original transaction. Then you can see the source is manual, transaction type is credit memo. This information is taken by the system automatically because you have selected the credit transaction option. Now here you can mention the amount, with how much amount you want to reduce this sales amount. You can give the detail here. Say in my case I have charged $500 extra to this customer by mistake, so I have to give the negative sign and then I have to give the amount here. So I have taken it as minus 500. Also you can see the credit percentage is automatically calculating by the system itself. So we have given the amount by which we want to reduce this sales amount. And now click on save, and you can click on complete and close. So this is our original transaction that we have created. Now go to the actions and then go to the view balance details. You can see here that the credit transaction that we have created was of -500, and now in the balance amount you can see system is taking -500 because we have created the credit transaction against this original invoice, and the balance amount is 8390, which is coming after deducting 500 to the original amount. Click on done. So this was one way to create the credit transaction against the original transaction. And now let's move to the second way for creating the credit transaction. In the billing workbench area, you have to go to the task panel, and under the task panel you can find the option that is credit transaction. Click on it. Here you have to give the original transaction number. Let's copy it from the manage transaction page. This is 79765. So by the time I have given the original transaction number, it have opened the details which are related to the original transaction, and also it have taken the transaction type as credit memo. Again you have to do the same process. Let's take it as -100. Again it will calculate the credit percentage, and you can see the amount here, that is the remaining balance amount here, 8290, and then you can click on complete and close. Again when you go to the original transaction, you will be able to see in the balance amount that it has deducted 100 from the balanced amount. You can see the credit memo that we have created. It is also showing under the transactions, and this is our original transaction. Click on it, and from actions you can see the balance. You can see here the credit memos that we have created against this transaction amounted to rupees 600 has been deducted by the system, and the final balance is 8290. So we have created the credit memos taking the reference of the original transaction. Now we will create the standalone credit transaction, and then we will apply the original invoice. For that you have to go to the task panel and then go to the create transactions. and in the transaction class you have to select it as credit memo. Again you have to select the business unit here. In the transaction source we are taking it as manual, and in the transaction type now you have to select the transaction type which is related to the credit transactions. So we are taking it as credit memo. It is asking for credit reason. So here you can select the reason for crediting the amount for this customer as per your business requirement. Let's take it as a discount. So in our this transaction I'm taking as if we are providing the extra discount to this customer on his this invoice. Let's take it as ABC Consulting. Give the reason here. So we are providing the discount of $5 per day to this customer. So we have charged earlier as $255 per day. Now we are reducing that as $255 to $250. Okay, so I have to give the minus account minus sign here. Click on complete and close. Again go to the manage transaction. Then click on search. You can see here the credit memo that we have created now. So this is a standalone credit memo. Now we have to apply the original transaction to this credit memo. For that you have to go to the navigator and then go to the receivable workbench area. And go to the accounts receivable and then go to the task panel, and here you will find the option that is the manage credit memo application. Click on this transaction. Search with the customer name. So this is the credit memo that we have created separately. Against this we have to apply our original transaction. When you will click on this credit memo, you will get the option that is add open receivables. Click on this. So this is the original transaction number of the invoice. Click this, select this transaction and then click on add. Then click on done. Click on save and close. Now you can see that we have applied the original transaction to this credit memo. Click on save and close, and now we will also look in the manage transaction. For that, go to the billing workbench area of receivable module. Click on manage transaction here and search with the customer name. So this was our original transaction, and go to the actions and go to view balance details. You can see in the credits and refunds 90 is also added, and the final remaining balance is $8,200, and this is the original amount of this invoice. Click on done. So in this way you can create the credit transactions against any original invoice. Now our next task for today is that we have to see how to create the debit transaction, that is debit memo transaction in the application. So why we create the debit memo transaction in the application? In case you have forgotten by mistake to charge any amount from the customer, then in that case you can create the debit memo transaction, and you have to create the debit memo transaction standalone. It does not have any linkage to the original transaction like credit memo transaction. Only you can provide the cross reference of the original transaction number while creating the debit memo transaction. As per the business requirement, due to any error in any charges are not applied to original invoice transaction, then the user will create manual debit memo transaction in the application. So let's move to our application, and from here we will see how to create the debit memo transaction. Go to the create transaction, and in the transaction class you have to select it as debit memo. In the business unit you have to select the business unit you have access for. Then in the transaction source we are taking it as manual. In the transaction type, let's take it as debit memo transaction type. Here give the bill to name, that is customer name. Select the payment term. And here you can search for the item. Let's take it as consulting service. Say in the original invoice we have charged only for 18 days to our customer, but later we realized that we have provided 20 days service to this customer, so we have forgotten to charge for extra 2 days. So we are creating the debit memo for the same. in the quantity, let's take it as 2, and it will measure in the days, as here we are taking it as unit of measure, and let's take it as 250. Now click on show more. So this is the customer detail. Then go to the payment tab. Here also you can select the remit to address. Also, if you want to change the payment term, you can do it from here. Then go to miscellaneous transaction, and here you can give the cross reference. So here I will mention the original transaction number of the invoice in which we have not charged the amount. So this was the transaction number. So here we have mentioned the reason of creating this debit memo. And also we have provided a cross reference. In the cross reference we have mentioned the original transaction number of the invoice. Now click on save, and you can see the status here as incomplete, and now we will select the option that is complete and review. Also you can see the image for this debit memo. This is the payment term. This is the debit memo number. When you have created the original invoice, you have seen in the image it was written invoice here, and now we are creating the debit memo. So system is taking it as debit memo, and this is the debit memo number. Click on OK. And then we will click on save and close. Now go to the manage transaction, and here we will search with the customer name. So this was the original transaction that we have created, and this is the debit memo that we have created against this transaction, and these are the credit memos that we have created against this transaction. Now let's view the account balance, and you will see here that system is only deducting the amount that we have created credit transaction for. And as I have told you that debit memo is the standalone transaction, and credit memo has linkage with the original transaction. So in our today's session we discussed the order to cash steps. Then we discussed what are the roles that are required by the user to perform the tasks which are related to AR module in the Oracle Fusion application. And then we discussed how to create the standard transaction, that is standard invoice, for the AR module. Then we have discussed the ways to create the credit memo transaction against the original invoice. Then we have seen how to create the debit memo transaction in the AR module. So this was all for today. Thank you so much for joining the session and have a good day.